Year 3 for Matt Rhule has been the money year. What does a successful year look like at Nebraska? And the next question, Dear Andy, Dear Ari, can Dylan Raiola crack either of your top 10 QBs list by season's end? I think he quickly went from overhyped to now very underrated. And that's
and he met us at the NFL draft. I don't know if you put that together, but
that's right. That's right. Yeah. That's right.
And he's my stock buddy.
Very nice. And it's a good question. It's a very good. I don't know that he's gone from overhyped. I don't know if he's underrated now. We didn't put him in the top 10. You can still be a good quarterback because there's 135 of them in the FBS that are starters. You can still be in the top 10% if you're not in the top 10.
Well, here's the thing. Anybody can play their way into that.
I mean, of course.
If you're really productive, then yeah, sure. I actually do think that I was very hard on him, a few weeks ago. And I don't know if that criticism was deserved in terms, because I've been doing a lot of thought on this. It's like if Dylan Raiola were just some 3-star prospect who, kind of came out of nowhere and, was the same person, but wasn't just the most hyped recruit in his class or one of the few that were in that category, then I don't know, we're not sitting here criticizing Iowa State's quarterback for no reason.
It's exactly the same. Like Jadeveon Clowney got released by the Panthers, and this may be the end of his career, and people are like, "That he was a bust in the NFL." Well, he was a bust in the NFL because he was the number 1 overall draft pick. If Jadeveon Clowney was picked 33rd in his draft, like the really first pick of the second round, it would be considered an incredible career.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's just part of the burden that you have to, live with if you're rated that high. But I was comparing him in the comparison to what he was supposed to be, not who he is or what most people in his position should be at this point in their career. So from that aspect, he certainly went from overrated, very overrated at the beginning because everybody's overrated at that point, to regularly rated. And that seems like a drastic fall off, but I don't know if I would like the thing is that you said top 10%, Andy, the game that we played with, would you take him over the other top 25 team quarterbacks? He wouldn't be top 10% in the country.
No, but he could be top 30%. And even now,
Andy, if he illustrates an ability to do the thing that I'm questioning he can do, which is extend plays and do that,
then he can easily jump into the top 10, period. So, yes.
To me, I think that maybe I was harsh, and I think people were upset about that. And if you were, I understand why you were. It's your quarterback, it's your team. But just know that I also think that he has a very high ceiling if he figures it out. I wasn't illustrating a doubt in him as a quarterback and never being good. I was illustrating a doubt in whether or not he can improve a certain aspect of his game that is very important, especially in the frame of the Patrick Mahomes comparison. So that to me is the number one question. And if you go back to the first one, Andy, that's a really, really difficult question to answer. And I'm very curious what you think in terms of what their successful season would look like.
For historical perspective, because they're asking, how would you compare this to other year 3s for Matt Rhule? For historical perspective, year 3 at Temple for Matt Rhule, they went 10-4, 7-1 in conference. Year 3 at Baylor, 11-3, 8-1 in conference, and ended up winning the league, I believe. So you've got both cases. They were coming off essentially right around 500 seasons. So Baylor was 7-6 the second year. Temple was 6-6 the second year. So Nebraska's coming off a 7-6 season. So that jump, if he were to be able to make it into double-digit wins, would be really incredible. Because given what he took over and the situation Nebraska was in when he got there, it would be pretty amazing. I don't think that he has to do that for this to be a successful season. I don't think they have to win 10 games for this to be a successful season. I think if they win the games they're supposed to win, don't have any sort of weird fluky losses, then you're looking at, maybe an 8-4 season. And that sort of steady improvement, given what Nebraska's been through the previous 15 years before Matt Rhule got there, I think they'd take that. I think that fan base would be very appreciative of a nice steady climb.
Few thoughts here, Andy. One, how much can you take in terms of historical data and try to spring it forward? You could say a coach needs 3 full years to have a huge bounce back, but how much can you actually, compare to a record?
Yeah, the whole world's changed
when you have an entirely different conference with different sizes and different teams and different schedule strength. But two, this is the overarching thought that I've had. And it kind of rang true to me a little bit because when I read this question in the email, I thought about this with Miami. If you've been listening to the show, you know that we have had a run-in with the Miami fan base this week, or specifically me, in terms of, my thought process on, how they got their 5-star commitment from Jackson Cantwell and what it means for the program and in college football. But of all the storied programs that in the 90s and the early 2000s were badass, how many of those programs have actually gotten to a point where they have readjusted what their thought process of success looks like? I think you can make the case that Nebraska is the only fan base in the country that was once the big, bad Alabama of the sport that no longer feels like it needs to compete at that level to be successful. Because, even if you think like powerhouses back from my childhood, Miami is trying to win national titles. Okay. USC still believes that it's, we got into an argument last week with somebody who thought that USC was a top 5 job. Who are other? Florida State isn't happy with
2 years ago, Florida State went 13-0. So yeah.
And then again, through no fault of their own, didn't accomplish what they wanted to accomplish. Still, even with that remarkable season, I'm trying to think of other powerhouses from our childhood that have fallen off in recent years.
Florida State's a tough one because they did win the national title in 2013 as well.
Yeah,
but
also I know it sounds weird, but it's been over a decade, man. It's been
Tennessee,
a long decade.
Tennessee producer River points out, they're good again, but
so would you think that Nebraska is the only fan base that has recategorized reasonable expectations for their program?
Yes. And I think they are reasonable. And it's interesting because I always felt like people outside sort of think they're just begging to get back to 1995. I think they understand that that's probably not going to happen again. But they can still be good at times. And so that all they want is for them to be a good program. And they've been in a below average program, through the Mike Riley era and the Scott Frost era. They can be a good program, though. And they have the resources, especially in the NIL era. They should be able to get a roster that can be competitive in the Big Ten. Maybe not competitive at the top of the Big Ten every single year, but every once in a while. Yeah, absolutely. So what I was looking at last year's results. Like, get rid of the UCLA loss. Like, if you just get rid of the UCLA loss, then you're on to something. Then you're moving. Because that makes you 7-5 in the regular season if you get rid of that. Now, play a little bit better against Iowa. You beat Iowa at home this year at the end of the season, and you've gotten rid of, you don't have your fluky loss like you had with UCLA. It's the 8-4. That's what we're talking about. So I think that would be nice, steady improvement. Now, look, Matt Rhule, historically, like we said, has made a big jump in this year. Now, they've got 2 new coordinators. Obviously, they brought in Dana Holgorsen at the end of last year, but that was at the very end. This is the time he's had the full offseason to put this in. Dylan Raiola, we mentioned, second year as a starting quarterback. You make your biggest jump usually between your first year as a starter and the second. So I see potential for them to be significantly better. So
I'm also really fired up for their 4th game of the season, which is against Michigan. I think we're going to find out a lot about both of those teams that week. I mean, maybe Michigan sooner because Michigan will have played Oklahoma at that point. But it is, to me, like, you want to know and try to get a gauge of how much improvement you're going to get. I think we'll know in game 4 for Nebraska for sure.
Yeah, I think this might be the end of the frustration. I think this is the year we see Nebraska emerge as a fully competent, effective football program. Yes, yeah. Solid football program. And then you build from there.
Yeah.
And the thing is, because things are random, ball bounces different ways. If they become effective, solid program, There's a potential 10-win season in that this year, depending on how things bounce.
I'm going through this with the car I bought. It had really good bones, and it used to be great. And now I'm doing things to it so that it can get back to its glory days. And the last thing I'm going to do is a paint restoration and detail. So the final step, it goes from being elite to wow. And I kind of feel like that's what's happening with Nebraska's football program a little bit. You inherit something that is in rough shape because it's old. You know it has the good bones to be an amazing situation. You have to put work into it for a few years in order to get to where you think it could be to build on. And then the final step is the polish and the paint restoration. So it gets back to the wow factor. And I think that we're probably in the midst of the repairs of the broken cup holder and, the lights at the bottom of the front that aren't working and the headrest, falling down and things like that. You have to fix all that stuff first. I don't know if this is a terrible analogy. I just wanted the excuse to talk about the car that I'm obsessed with, but that's kind of how I feel about it. Does that make sense to you? Though?
I think it feels like they've fixed the big problems and now you're just making fine-tuning tweaks.
Yeah, and then when they're ready to win 11 games, that's the polish phase where you make it detailed and it looks beautiful and it's back to what it is. So, but that's not a 2-year or a 3-year fix for Nebraska. But the good news is that by year 3, the defrosting should be over with, right? Like the boneheaded 7-point, 3-point losses where something terribly hilarious happens at the end to everybody but Nebraska fans. We should be through that by now. Like they shouldn't be losing games in frustrating, agonizing ways because Nebraska, for how bad their record is, was a statistical anomaly on how many one-possession games they were losing in absolutely wild ways. If they can get that out of their system, that puts them in a position to win half of those one-possession games. You've already seen that improvement in the record. Now, the next step is winning all those games that you have a chance to win, which is the hardest part, right? It's, going from top 50 to top 30.
Yeah,
it's going from top 30 to top 15. So
it's winning the Iowa game when you go into the fourth quarter up 10-3.
Right.
It's doing that. So it's not losing to UCLA when you have no business losing to UCLA. Those are the next steps. And like you make those next steps, there's steps after that too. So I think that Nebraska fans should feel pretty good. If they win 8 games this year, feel really good. If it's more than that, that's just gravy. That's fantastic. But if you can go 8-4, you are on the right track. Because if they go 8-4, Ari, there's a really good chance they just won the games they were supposed to win. So if you do better than that, now you're beating teams that maybe you're not supposed to beat.
Back at the notion that there are 4 games that are automatic losses on the schedule too.
That's true. You're right about that because, well, let's go through the schedule. Cincinnati, they should win. Akron, they should win. Houston Christian, they should win.
I thought it was UConn again. I learned nothing.
Michigan, that's a toss-up. That's not an automatic loss.
I give them a 25% chance to win that game right now in my made-up math in my office right now.
Michigan State in Lincoln, that's one I think Nebraska should probably win. At Maryland is one Nebraska should probably win. So we're already at 5 wins. We'll see about Minnesota. But Northwestern's one they should win. We'll see about USC. That should be a 50-50 game. Now, that wasn't a 50-50 game if you watched them play last year.
But you give them a 30% shot in that one. So even though assign them a loss there, you're still only at 7-2 there.
Yeah. UCLA, that's the one we talked about. Now, maybe they're significantly better. We'll see what happens with Nico. I told you I liked what Deshaun Foster's doing there. I like the fact that they found an identity toward the end of last season, but still, that's one Nebraska should win. So that would put them at 8 wins. They're supposed to lose at Penn State. That would not be shocking to anybody. And then you've got the Iowa game at home, which you could be playing for a 9th win right there.
Like, and also, too, the only
that's a great season right there
that you automatically assign a loss in is the Penn State game. They avoid Oregon and Ohio State on their schedules, so I feel like 10 wins could be a pretty reasonable goal.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because the Michigan game is not an auto loss. The USC game is not an auto loss.
Like 1-1 there, they're in a position to maybe play in the Big Ten championship game with a better schedule or a more advantageous schedule as some of their counterparts. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but if Dylan Raiola takes the step forward that all the mad Nebraska fans are anticipating, and they knock off USC or Michigan, and they go 1-1 in that, and then win all the games they're supposed to, and then they beat Minnesota, that's not going to be easy. That's on the road. You have a legitimate path there to at least only having 2 losses at the end of the year. And if you have 2 losses in the Big Ten, you might be in the position to outside shot for playing in the Indianapolis.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. I think they can be very competitive. Like the idea of Nebraska, think about that. If let's say that season plays out the way we talked about, like what if Nebraska has 8 wins going into that Penn State game and is an outside playoff contender? That's that's a huge game in State College if that happens.
If Dylan Raiola is a top 5 quarterback in college football this year, that's not impossible.
No, not at all. Not at all. So now Nebraska's win total, and everybody released their new win totals last week. Nebraska's win total is 7.5. So I think putting this at 8 makes a lot of sense of saying this is the reasonable expectation of success.
I like the over there, though.
I do too. I feel very good about the over. I feel much better with the over than I would the under. So
which is probably pretty good news for Nebraska.
Yeah, I think you guys have gotten out of the woods, and now you've got a competent football team. The next step is becoming a really good football team.